In a sun-soaked corner of Texas, a rancher named Clara stood with her hands resting on her hips, looking out over the golden fields that stretched for miles. The land was vast, nearly endless, but Clara felt it pressing in on her. Every inch was a reminder of the challenges she faced. Drought had held a tight grip on her ranch, leaving the soil dry and cracked. The cattle were thin, and the grass barely reached their ankles. Clara had worked this land all her life, yet now it seemed to conspire against her. One hot afternoon, as the sun blazed down, Clara made her way to a small grove of trees. It was a quiet sanctuary away from the chaos of the ranch, and she often retreated there to find solace. Today, however, as she approached, she noticed something unusual. A figure was kneeling in the dust, her hands clasped together, head bowed in deep prayer. Clara's heart raced. Who was this? No one should be out here alone. As she drew closer, she recognized a young woman, Grace, a recent transplant to the area. Clara had only seen her a few times at the small country store in town. Grace had moved from the city in search of something, though what Clara didn't know. Clara called gently, careful not to startle her. Grace looked up, her eyes bright and glistening with tears. "Oh, Clara," she said, her voice trembling like the leaves in the warm breeze. Clara knelt beside her, the dust rising around them. She asked, her voice laced with concern. Grace wiped her tears with the back of her dusty hand. "Just so hard," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I came here to start fresh, but I've lost everything." With each word, Clara felt a twinge of understanding. She had her own battles with loneliness and despair. Life on the ranch was often isolating, especially now under the scorching sun that felt like a never-ending weight on her shoulders. Clara said softly, looking out over the fields. Grace nodded, her eyes reflecting the sun's glare. "I just wanted to find peace, somewhere to believe again," she said, her voice breaking. Clara placed a comforting hand on Grace's back. "You're not alone, we all struggle." In that moment, Clara committed to help this young woman find her way, not just by comforting her, but in a way that would create a lasting change. Together, they stood and surveyed the land, the dust still swirling around them. Clara had an idea. "What if we built something here?" "Yes," Clara said, excitement sparking in her heart. "A small chapel right here in this grove, a place of peace for the ranch, for the community." The words hung in the air, blooming like wildflowers in the harsh terrain. It was a crazy idea, but Clara felt a spark of courage igniting within her. Over the next few weeks, the idea took root in their hearts. Every morning, Clara would arrive at the grove, armed with tools and supplies. Grace, lighter in spirit, joined her each day. Together, they cleared the area, chopping wood and pulling weeds, laughing as they shared stories and dreams. With every swing of the hammer, Clara felt the burdens of her ranch lift, the worries of drought fading in the shadow of their project. As their chapel began to take shape, Clara noticed how the light changed for both of them. Grace, who had once seemed lost amid the dust, began to shine like the golden sun. She spoke of faith, of hope, and the good that life could bring, her laughter filling the air, mingling with the scents of fresh pine and cedar. But the journey wasn't without hardships. One evening, while they were laying the roof, dark clouds rolled in, thick and heavy, threatening to pour rain down upon them. The first drops fell, quickly turning to a torrential downpour. They rushed to take cover under the small trees, both soaked to the bone, shivering as the storm raged around them. Grace shouted over the loud claps of thunder, frustration overshadowing her earlier hope. Clara pulled her close, trying to shield her from the rain. "Listen, Grace, storms can't last forever. Just like our struggles, they come and go. We have to hold on." She pointed up at the heavens, where a faint light began to break through the dark clouds. Clara continued, "There's always light after the storm." Grace looked up, wiping the water from her eyes. "You're right, we can't give up." Renewed determination, they forged ahead, tackling the storm with every ounce of strength they could muster. Weeks turned into months, and with time and an unwavering spirit, the chapel stood proudly in the grove. They adorned it with wooden pews and a simple altar made from stones Clara had gathered from the nearby hills. The walls were painted a warm cream color, glimmering softly under the sunlight. Inside, it felt cradled by the arms of nature, a peaceful oasis surrounded by the vastness of the ranch. When the chapel was finally finished, Clara and Grace stood together, hands clasped, thanking the land and the community for the journey they had undertaken. Clara couldn't believe how far they had come, not just in building a physical space, but in building a refuge for anyone seeking solace, including themselves. At the chapel's grand opening, people arrived from across the ranch, curious about the new building that had sprouted from the dust. Men and women found themselves drawn to it, intrigued by the stories they'd heard. They found more than a chapel, they found a haven. Some brought food, others stories, all eager to experience the warmth Clara and Grace had created. Inside, laughter and conversation flowed almost like a river, filling the air with light and love. Grace, standing beside Clara, beamed with joy as people sat, sharing their burdens and hopes. Clara had never seen community come together this way, and what surprised her even more was the healing that took place right before her eyes. A local farmer shared his struggles with infertility in his fields, and another woman spoke of the loss of her son. But in this space, they discovered not only empathy but also a sense of connection. Clara watched as people prayed together, shared stories, and even laughed, all barriers breaking down in the face of mutual support. With each encounter, Clara felt her heart swelling. She realized that the chapel had become more than just a building. It had become a living body of hope. It was a safe harbor from the unpredictable storms of life. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, Clara's ranch began to flourish again. The rains, once scarce, came pouring down, quenching the once thirsty soil. Fleets of green sprouted where brown had dominated, and the cattle began to grow healthy and strong. Clara felt her own spirit flourish, reborn with energy and determination. One bright morning, as Clara watched her cattle wander through the lush grass, she spotted Grace in the chapel, kneeling in prayer. Clara's heart swelled with gratitude. Grace had found a way to embrace her new life, encouraging others to share their stories, and in many ways she had become a cornerstone of their community. As Clara stood in the golden light, she realized that building the chapel was as much about finding strength in one another as it was about finding peace. The dust that had once felt like a shroud now served as a foundation, binding them together. In that space, amidst stories of loss and love, Clara learned that hope wasn't just about wishing for better days. It was about holding on to one another, sharing burdens, and standing tall in the face of adversity. The chapel became a symbol of resilience, not just for Grace or Clara, but for everyone who had ever felt lost in the dust. Here they discovered that together they could build a brighter future, shaped by faith, friendship, and a connection to the land they all shared. Underneath the vast expanse of Texas skies, amidst the dust and the sun, Clara and Grace knew they had crafted something truly remarkable. It was not just a chapel, it was a testament to the human spirit, a celebration of resilience that could light the darkest paths leading through life. From this little chapel in the grove, they had created a community spirit so powerful that even the harshest drought could not stand against it. And as the wind swept through the trees, it carried with it a whisper of hope, a promise of renewal in the dust. In the heart of Texas, beneath an unyielding sun, Clara McAllister knelt in the dirt, hands digging into the earth as if seeking answers buried deep within. With each grain of dust that clung to her skin, a familiar loneliness washed over her. The drought had seized her ranch. Every day felt like a battle with the relentless heat. Cattle wandered the parched landscape, their bones protruding beneath sunburned hides, but today was different. As she wiped the sweat from her brow, Clara heard a sound soft and delicate. Someone was praying. Turning slowly, she spotted a figure in the distance, kneeling among the weeds and dried grass, head bowed low. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? She'd seen no one else on the ranch for weeks, only the echo of her own thoughts whispering in the silence. Cautiously, she approached, the crunch of gravel beneath her boots breaking the stillness of the moment. As she drew closer, she recognized the young woman. Grace was her name, a newcomer to the area, a city girl looking for something she couldn't quite articulate. Clara had seen her at the feed store a few times, her eyes wide with wonder and uncertainty. Now they glistened with tears, hands clasped together in fervent prayer. Clara called softly, careful not to startle her. Grace looked up, her face a mix of surprise and vulnerability. "Oh, Clara," she said, her voice shaky as she wiped her tears with her sleeve. The pain in her voice pierced through the heavy air. Clara knelt beside her, feeling the grit of the dirt beneath her knees. She asked gently, searching Grace's tear-stricken face for answers. I needed to find some peace," Grace explained, her words tumbling out like a broken dam. "Everything feels lost." Clara felt a wave of empathy wash over her. Here was another soul seeking solace in the dust, much like herself just days before. "We all struggle," Clara replied, her voice steady yet soft. Grace glanced at Clara, hope flickering in her eyes like a dim star in a shadowed sky. "What if we created something here, a place where people can come when they feel lost?" Clara suggested, the words igniting a flame within her. Grace's eyes widened as she absorbed the idea. "You mean?" "Yes," Clara said, her heart racing with excitement. "We could clear this space, make it a haven for anyone seeking peace. You could pray here and others could too." A quiet determination settled over them. They stood and surveyed the barren landscape, the sun beating down like a relentless adversary. But Clara felt energy coursing through her veins, a newfound purpose blooming in the dust. From that day on, Clara and Grace turned the grove into a place of creation. Each morning they met at sunrise, the world still wrapped in the soft embrace of dawn. They cleared away weeds, cutting and chopping, laughing and sharing stories. With every swing of the hammer and every nail they drove into wood, Clara shed the weight of her solitude. The laughter echoed through the silence. Grace, once a lost girl, became a beacon of hope. As they worked, they talked about their dreams. Grace shared her yearning for a sense of belonging, while Clara spoke of the earth's plight, the way it mirrored their personal battles. Drought had pinched her spirit, yet here, side by side, they unearthed something deeper than just soil. They found a connection. Weeks turned into months, and the chapel began to rise. Walls of wood framed a glimpse of sanctuary. Clara could hardly believe their eyes. Each day, they prayed out loud, giving thanks for this tiny miracle growing from their sweat and tears. But the journey was not without storms. One evening, as thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, dark clouds rolled in swiftly. The wind whipped through the trees, sending branches crashing to the ground. Clara and Grace were mid-construction, and panic gripped them as they sought refuge under the newly built roof. Grace shouted over the howling wind, frustration brimming in her voice. Clara, heart pounding, slid closer to Grace. "Just a storm," she replied, her voice steady. "Every storm brings rain, and every challenge gives us strength." Looking outside, the heavy rain seemed relentless, turning the ground into a muddy mess. For a moment, despair hung heavy between them. But then, through the cracks in the clouds, Clara noticed a sliver of sunlight breaking through, illuminating the chapel walls. Clara pointed. Even now, the light is there. Grace turned to see it, her heart lifting slightly at the sight. "We can't give up," Grace whispered, determination rekindling. With that newfound strength, the two women returned to their work, pushing through the storm, standing firm against the pouring rain. They belted a song into the wind, laughter defying the ferocity of nature, two spirits refusing to yield. When the storm finally passed, the air felt electric with clarity. They emerged, soaked and muddy, but with smiles like radiant suns. The two women had come through it together, and in many ways, they were no longer alone. By the time they completed the chapel, it was a sanctuary not just of faith, but of friendship. They painted the walls a bright, welcoming color and gathered pieces from the ranch, stones from Clara's favorite creek and wildflowers that sprung up after the rains to decorate the altar. As they stood in the finished chapel, Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. This space now held their shared laughter, their moments of despair, and their unwavering faith. It felt alive, filled with unseen spirits of everyone who had ever walked this land. Word of the chapel spread through the ranching community. Soon, neighbors began to arrive, drawn by the small haven nestled near Clara's fields. Clara watched in awe as people came in droves, embracing the warmth of the chapel and each other. Men and women shared stories that carved deeper connections, revealing their own struggles and fears. A mother spoke of her worries about her children, a farmer told of losing his crops to the harsh sun, and an elderly couple recalled the love that had carried them through darker days. Clara and Grace welcomed them all, ensuring they felt heard, their hearts dancing in the glow of the community they had built together. The chapel wasn't just a structure anymore, it was a beacon of hope, a testament to resilience born from dust. 3 months after their grand opening, during a community gathering on a warm summer evening, Clara noticed Grace standing in a corner, watching the laughter and joy unfold. She walked over, concern creasing her brow. Grace turned to Clara, a smile breaking through. "I just can't believe this, all these people, all this joy." "It is," Clara agreed, glancing at the faces lit by a golden sunset. "But this miracle happened because we weren't afraid to get our hands dirty." Grace nodded, her eyes sparkling. "I thought I was alone, lost in my own darkness." Clara patted her shoulder. "We found our way together. That evening was powerful. With warm laughter mingling with the sweet smell of barbecued dinners, Clara felt lighter than air. In the gentle sway of the evening breeze, there was a reminder of how intertwining lives could shape something beautiful from hardship. As night fell, Clara stepped outside, the Texas sky dotted with stars that twinkled like lanterns against the dark. She took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs. The chapel stood tall behind her, a proud emblem of hope amidst a harsh landscape. And then she heard it again, the soft sound of prayer. This time it wasn't just Grace, it was the voices of the community murmuring their needs and gratitude. She stood there, enveloped in a profound sense of belonging. They had built this together, each prayer an echo of their resilience, every heartbeat a promise of brighter days ahead. In that moment, Clara understood that the dust they once loathed held the power to nourish new beginnings. The chapel, born from their struggles, had forged a bond between them, lighting the path forward. They were no longer lost amid the dust. They were part of a thriving, vibrant tapestry, woven tightly by hope, love, and the unyielding spirit of the land. And as the stars twinkled high above, it felt as if the universe quietly cheered them on a chorus of resilience echoing through the vast mountain range, a tale woven not just with words, but with the very essence of life itself. In the heart of Texas, amid the heartache of drought and despair, Clara McAllister stumbled upon a scene that would change her life forever. It was a hot afternoon, the kind that seemed to stretch endlessly under the blazing sun, when she spotted a figure kneeling in the dust next to her cattle corral. At first, she thought it was an illusion, a trick of the heat rising from the ground, but as she got closer, she could see it was a young woman, her hands clasped tightly, head bowed as she prayed fervently. Clara called out, curiosity mingled with concern. The young woman looked up, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and vulnerability. "I'm Grace," she replied, her voice carrying a tremor that echoed the fragility of the moment. "I didn't mean to disturb you, Clara's heart softened. In the stark beauty of the dry landscape, here was someone seeking comfort just as she had been struggling to find resilience. Clara asked, kneeling down beside her. Grace took a shaky breath. "It's everything," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought moving to this place would bring me peace after everything that happened back home. But I feel so lost. The drought makes it hard for everyone here. I thought maybe." Her voice trailed off, the weight of her worries settling heavily between them. Clara felt a connection blooming, as if the dust swirling around them was weaving their souls together. She understood. Here was a young woman craving hope amidst a challenging landscape, much like herself. "You're not alone, Grace," Clara said, her voice steady. "We all feel the weight of this dry land, but perhaps we could build something here together." Grace looked at Clara, her eyes flickering with curiosity and a hint of disbelief. "Yes," Clara replied, her heart racing with excitement. "A small chapel right here, a sanctuary in the dust where we can come when we feel lost." After a moment, a smile broke through Grace's tears. "I love it." They stood, hands clasped together in agreement, their spirits ignited with a shared vision. The weeks that followed transformed the grove behind Clara's house. Each morning, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they met with excitement. Together, they cleared the ground, chopping through the stubborn brush, the laughter of their budding friendship echoing in the stillness. Clara had worked the land for years, but this felt different. It echoed with a spirit of renewal, a defiance against despair. With every measured swing of the shovel, Clara felt her own burdens lift. It was a shared labor filled with hope, and each day deepened their bond. They swapped tales, exchanged laughs, and encouraged each other as their vision began to take form. But as they began to gather supplies, reality set in like the rising sun. The drought seemed never-ending, each day stretching into another, leaving the earth parched and barren. The cattle wandered aimlessly, and Clara watched helplessly as the land she loved suffered under the relentless Texas sun. "I don't know how we're going to do this," Clara confided one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. Grace placed her hand on Clara's shoulder, understanding the weight of despair. "This chapel isn't just a building, it's a symbol of our hope." With renewed determination, Clara and Grace continued their work, pushing past doubts that threatened to overwhelm them. They found old timber, nailed together boards, and painted the walls a warm cream color, choosing supplies that felt meaningful. As sweat dripped down their brows and dirt clung to their backs, they created something that had the potential to lift spirits across the ranch. But one fateful evening, as they were working on the roof, an ominous rumble echoed across the land. Clara looked up to see dark clouds swirling ominously in the distance. Before they could react, rain poured from the sky like a waterfall. They ran for cover, but the turbulent storm tossed branches and debris around them. Grace shouted, struggling to shield herself from the pelting rain. Clara gritted her teeth against the wind. "Storms can't last forever, Grace. They are a part of life, just like our struggles." As the rain pounded down, the two women huddled close, the noise drowning out their fears. For what felt like hours, they listened as nature roared. But then, just as suddenly as it started, the storm began to ease, leaving behind a gentle drizzle that turned the world into a blanket of shimmering droplets. Stepping outside, their spirits were buoyed by the fresh scent of earth after rain. And as they turned to look at their chapel, they noticed that in its modest beauty, it had withstood the raging storm. The walls stood strong, the roof intact, their symbol of hope solid against the elements. Days turned to weeks, and their chapel began to take shape, but the drought still clung to the land like a bitter memory. The cattle grew thinner, the fields were parched. Clara felt despair creeping in again like a shadow at dusk. Then one day, tired and overwhelmed, she found Grace sitting alone in the unfinished chapel. Clara asked, noticing the tears on Grace's cheeks. "I just feel so hopeless," Grace confessed. "We're building this chapel, but I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel." Clara sat beside her, feeling the weight of her own pain mirrored in Grace. "I know how you feel, but sometimes that darkness can lead us to find our strength." Clara took a deep breath, her voice steady. "We're not just building a chapel, we're crafting a community." Grace nodded slowly, as if absorbing Clara's words. "You're right, this chapel is more than just walls, it's our hope for brighter days." Just then, Clara glanced out toward the fields, spotting the sun breaking free from the clouds, golden light spilling over the horizon. She exclaimed, the warmth touching her skin. "The sun is shining again, just like us, it rises after every storm." With renewed spirit, they returned to their project, and slowly but surely, the chapel grew into a beautiful sanctuary. They decorated it with cherished items collected from the ranch, stones from the creek, wooden beams aged with memories, and wildflowers that Clara treasured. Then one evening, as they stepped back to admire their work, the sun setting in vibrant hues behind the chapel, Clara felt overwhelmed with emotion. "I can't believe we did this," she said, wiping away a tear. "Thank you for believing in me, Clara," Grace said softly. "No, it's us together," Clara insisted. Chapel is a testament to all of us. Their grand opening arrived, and Clara hardly recognized the chapel, now glowing under the evening sky. Flyers had circulated through the town, each matting of paper announcing the gathering. Neighbors began to arrive, drawn by curiosity and a hunger for connection. As Clara stood at the entrance, her heart raced. People poured in, filling the space with warmth and laughter. Clara watched in amazement as they embraced one another, exchanging stories of sorrow and hope. A farmer stepped forward, sharing his difficulties with the drought, while a woman spoke of her struggle after losing her job. No longer were they just individuals battling through dry days, they were a community, supporting one another with open hearts. Instead of silence, there was a chorus of voices intertwined in an easy melody. Clara looked at Grace, her eyes filled with pride. Together, they had created something powerful, a sanctuary in the dust where people could find comfort in each other. Before long, Clara stepped into the center of the chapel, her heart racing as she addressed everyone there. "Welcome, this place was built with love, with our stories and struggles woven together." Applause erupted, and Clara felt the room swell with unity. Grace stood beside her, beaming. "We may face challenges ahead, but here we become stronger together," she said, echoing Clara's sentiments, her voice carrying warmth that wrapped around them all. The days that followed their gathering brought unexpected growth. The rains eventually returned like forgotten friends, soaking the thirsty soil, breathing life back into the ranch. Grazing cattle grew strong and healthy, flourishing on grass that had become rich once more. But it was more than just the fields that blossomed, so too did their community. People began coming to the chapel regularly, sharing stories, laughter, and faith. What started as a vision between two women took root in the hearts of many, becoming a beacon in times of darkness that celebrated resilience and belonging. Clara remembered the moment she found Grace praying in the dust, the moment they had decided to build something together. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet each day in the chapel felt like a fresh start, a solid reminder that even the dust could be transformed into a sacred space. As the sun set on the ranch, painting the sky with vibrant oranges and deep purples, Clara stood outside the chapel, the gentle breeze rustling the leaves overhead. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of profound gratitude wash over her. The chapel wasn't just a place, it was a living testament to hope, perseverance, and the undeniable strength found in togetherness. In that moment, she knew the journey was far from over. Challenges would come and go, just like the seasons. But with the community by her side, and with Grace's unwavering spirit, they could face anything. As darkness descended and the stars began to twinkle against the night sky, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of peace. They had built more than just walls, they had built a home for hope, where every prayer whispered would echo through the dust and carry them forward into the light. In the blistering heat of midsummer, Clara McAllister watched the sun bleed crimson across the Texas horizon. The ground beneath her feet was parched, crackling like old parchment, each fissure a testament to the relentless drought that had plagued her ranch for far too long. It was a hard world out here, full of dust and despair, where even the prairie grass had shriveled to mere whispers of green. Then something caught her eye. As she turned, she saw a figure huddled near the old oak tree, down on her knees, hands clenched tightly together. Clara squinted, compelled to investigate. It was a young woman, hair wild from the wind, the dirt on her face a mix of both the earth and her tears. She was praying, or at least that's what it looked like, her head bowed as if she was pleading with the universe itself. Clara called out, stepping closer. The young woman looked up, startled. I'm Grace," she stammered, stumbling to her feet, brushing dust from her clothes. "I didn't mean to intrude." Clara's heart softened. "You're on my land, there's no need to be shy." Grace took a moment, gathering her thoughts, her breath hitching. "I moved here from the city," she explained, her voice cracking. "I thought the open spaces would help me find myself." Clara felt a pang of understanding. The years of drought had weighed heavily on her, stripping her ranch of its spirit. "Life here can be tough," she said gently. Grace nodded, the dust swirling around her as she spoke. "I was hoping to pray and maybe find some direction." Clara took a step closer, feeling the air thrum with unspoken heartache. "We're all a little lost sometimes. How about this? What if we turn this spot into something special?" Grace's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope igniting within them. "You mean build a chapel?" "Yes," Clara replied, her heart racing with the excitement of the idea. A sanctuary in the dust. They stood together, two souls in the Texas wind, both searching for answers, beginning to craft a future from the remnants of despair. That day marked the beginning of their journey. The following weeks were a blur of hard work and laughter. Clara and Grace met daily at sunrise, fueled by coffee and determination. Together they cleared the grove beneath the old oak tree, fighting against the stubborn brush that had taken root in the arid soil. Clara felt something awakening inside her, a spirit she thought the drought had buried. As they worked, Grace shared stories of her past, painting a picture of a city life full of noise and chaos. In between swings of the shovel, Clara opened up about her ranch, the heartbreak of losing cattle to the unforgiving sun, and the creeping loneliness that had threatened to engulf her. They found solace not just in their work, but in their words. The dust that once felt heavy began to seem lighter under their shared laughter. But just as hope started to bloom, reality hit harder than a Texas thunderstorm. The drought lingered, stubborn as ever. Clara noticed the gauge on the water trough was still dropping, and the grass remained brown like a forgotten dream. The struggle of keeping her ranch afloat hung over her like a dark cloud. One night, as they sat next to a small fire, Grace looked defeated. "Clara, what if this chapel can't happen?" "I can feel the darkness creeping in again." Clara stared into the flickering flames, finding strength in the light. "We're not wasting our time. Building this chapel is more than just bricks and wood. It's about hope and connection." "You're right," Grace breathed, her spirit reigniting with Clara's words. "Let's keep fighting." With renewed vigor, they returned to their work. They salvaged wood from old buildings on the ranch, transforming broken beams into something beautiful. Each nail they hammered in felt like a promise. The chapel began to rise from the dust, becoming a symbol not just of their hopes but of their resilience against the relentless drought. But then one day the storm rolled in. It wasn't the gentle kind that teased the earth with the promise of rain. This was fierce, unforgiving. Thunder cracked like a whip and the wind howled through the trees. Clara and Grace were inside working on the chapel's roof when the storm hit. Clara shouted, her heart racing. As the rain poured down, they dashed for cover beneath the oak tree. The world around them felt like it was unraveling, branches snapping as the storm raged. Grace's face was pale against the dark sky, eyes wide with fear. She yelled, battling against the wind. Clara held onto Grace's arm. It's just a storm, Grace. Every storm passes. Muffled by the din of the storm, Grace nodded, determination slowly returning. You're right. Then, in the midst of the chaos, Clara felt something shift. The rain began to ease, the wind softened, almost as if nature itself was responding to their spirit. The tension broke, and they stood in the quiet aftermath, the sheen of water glistening on the ground around them. As they emerged from their shelter, the sight of the old oak tree against a deepening sky was breathtaking. The chapel standing despite the storm almost took Clara's breath away. It was a fragile beauty, illuminated by the light breaking through the clouds. Look at that, Grace exclaimed, pointing to the sun beginning to peek through the gray. It's beautiful. Days passed, and the storm's aftermath gave way to a sense of calm. The rains returned in small doses, and Clara noticed the ground softening, the dust turning to rich soil once more. With every passing moment, the fields began to breathe again. The ranch felt alive, awakening from a long, dry sleep. Grace started to spend more time in the chapel, her prayers turned into dreams, her fingers tracing the polished beams they had worked so hard to create. One evening, Clara found her there, candlelight flickering, her face serene. Grace whispered, eyes sparkling. It is, Clara agreed, taking a moment to let the warmth settle in her heart, but it's not just a place. As they neared completion, word spread through the community. Neighbors began to stop by, drawn by the quiet beauty of the chapel. Clara never dreamed there would be so much support, as people who had once felt divided were suddenly coming together. A palpable energy filled the air, lifting them all. Then came the day they finally held the chapel's official opening. Clara stood at the entrance, nervously adjusting her scarf as the sun set with a brilliant display of oranges and purples. The grove filled with laughter and chatter, the scent of food wafting through the air. People embraced, sharing stories, their voices mingling in a beautiful tapestry of hope. Clara looked around, seeing familiar faces of those who had come on tough days, those battling hardship. It was a moment unlike anything she had experienced in years. As she made her way to the front, Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She cleared her throat and silence fell over the crowd. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice steady yet thick with emotion. This chapel isn't just a structure, it's a place where we can come together, a space born from struggle and hope. Grace stepped beside Clara, her own eyes glistening. When I first came here, I thought I would collapse under the weight of it all, but with Clara, this community, this chapel, became a lifeline. With that, Clara reached for the wooden doors and pushed them open, revealing the chapel's interior. Inside glowed a warm light, reflecting the care they had put into every detail. People stepped in, taking in the warmth and safety of the space, their faces brightening with realization. Clara asked Grace as she watched people touch the beams, read the heartfelt words painted along the walls. It's perfect, Grace replied, her face a mix of joy and gratitude. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows, Clara felt the rush of something profound. They had built more than just a chapel, they had created a home for hope. The months rolled on, and the chapel became a sanctuary for all who needed it. The rains continued, the fields blossomed, and with every gathering people found solace, comfort, and companionship, like threads weaving a colorful fabric of stories. But one evening, as Clara prepared for another meeting, she felt the familiar pang of loneliness return. As the sun set, she sat alone in the chapel, eastern and western hearts shaped into the walls around her. Then Grace burst in, carrying wildflowers and a grin that could rival the sun. She shouted joyfully, scattering petals around Clara. "Those are beautiful, Grace," Clara said, her heart swelling at the sight. Grace stepped closer, her expression suddenly serious. "You've shown me that even in the dust we can build magic." Clara touched Grace's arm gently, "and they will continue to carry us through the storms and the quiet nights." From that day on, the chapel became a hub of joy, love, and healing. Clara and Grace worked to facilitate gatherings, encouraging stories to be shared and burdens to be lifted. As time passed and the seasons changed, they found joy in the little moments, children playing outside, families gathering for dinners, and friends leaning on each other through hard times. The spirit of the chapel grew, becoming not just a place but a living testament to the strength found in vulnerability. Standing in the chapel one evening, while the last light faded into night, Clara knew without a doubt that the journey they had embarked on had changed them all forever. The dust that had once felt like a weight now felt like a foundation, one built on hope, love, and a reminder that they could face anything together. And as the stars began to twinkle above, Clara felt a sense of peace wash over her. The chapel stood strong in the night, a symbol of resilience against the vast Texas landscape. In that moment, she knew deep in her heart that waiting in the dust were countless stories of heartbreak, healing, and love, interwoven into the fabric of their lives. And as they pressed onward, Clara could hear faint whispers of prayers carried on the warm night wind, promises of more beauty yet to come. In the arid heart of Texas, where the sun blazed like an angry eye and the dust settled thickly on everything, Clara McAllister knelt in the dirt, hands pressed into the scorched earth. The sky had been barren for weeks, offering no sign of rain, only a relentless, oppressive heat that seemed to drain the life out of her body and soul. Clara was a rancher, but lately every morning felt like an uphill battle against despair. That afternoon, she trudged toward her worn cattle corral, her boots crunching on the dry ground. Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of movement. A figure knelt under the shade of an old, gnarled tree. Clara squinted, her heart racing. Who could be out here alone? She drew closer, the heat radiating off the parched earth. As she approached, she discovered it was a young woman, her hair tangled by the wind, her clothes dusty and worn. The woman was crying, her hands clasped tightly together, whispering fervently into the ether. Clara felt a pinch of something: sympathy, concern, perhaps a flicker of recognition. "Excuse me," Clara said gently, stepping closer. The girl looked up, startled, her large eyes reflecting both surprise and vulnerability. I'm Grace," she stammered, scrambling to her feet. "I didn't mean to intrude." Clara's heart softened as she scanned Grace's tear-stained cheeks. "You're not intruding," Clara reassured her, kneeling to match her height. Tears pooled in Grace's eyes, making her voice tremble. "I moved here recently, trying to escape some things from my past. I thought the open air would help me find peace, but now it feels so empty." Clara felt the weight of her loneliness echoing in Grace's words. She understood that longing for peace, that searching for meaning in a world that felt chaotic and unforgiving. "Life can be tough here in the dust," Clara said, her voice steady. "But you're not alone in this. We all struggle. What if we created something together?" Grace blinked, her eyes widening with curiosity. "Yes," Clara replied, the idea igniting a fire within her. "A small chapel right here in this grove of trees." Hope blossomed on Grace's face, breaking through her earlier despair. "I'd love to do that," she said, a spark igniting in her eyes. And just like that, Clara felt something shift deep inside her, a sense of purpose awakening. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Clara and Grace met at sunrise, their laughter mingling with the crisp morning air as they worked together. They cleared the area beneath the trees, pulling weeds and digging up roots, their hands roughening with every task. With each swing of the shovel, Clara felt the weight of her burdens lightening, her spirit rekindling with the laughter and companionship blossoming in their newfound friendship. "It's hard to believe I was so lost," Grace admitted one afternoon, wiping the sweat from her brow. "It is alive," Clara replied, her heart swelling, "and it's going to be even more alive when we finish the chapel." But as they worked, the drought lingered like a shadow, refusing to lift. The cattle grew thinner, the fields remained bare and brown, every inch of land a harsh reminder of struggle. Clara glanced at Grace, whose smile began to fade under the weight of despair that often clouded her own heart. One evening, as they sat under the stars after a long day of work, Clara turned to Grace, her voice heavy with honesty. "What if we can't finish?" Grace looked into the night sky, her face reflecting the shimmering stars. "Every dream starts small, Clara. It's the belief we put into it that makes it grow. And besides, this isn't just about us." With renewed resolve, they returned to their work, determined to make the chapel not just a structure, but a symbol of hope. They salvaged wood from old barns on the ranch, nailing together beams that had weathered storms and time. Each swing of the hammer felt like a promise to themselves and to each other that they would not give in to despair. Weeks passed and the chapel began to rise, but the stress of the drought hung heavily on Clara's shoulders. One evening, an ominous storm rolled in. The sky turned dark and the air crackled with tension as the clouds swirled ominously above. Clara and Grace scrambled to gather their tools, seeking shelter from the impending storm. "I don't like this," Grace said, voice shaky. "What if the chapel falls apart?" "We can't give up," Clara shouted over the howling wind. "Every storm has its end." Just as the storm broke, water pouring from the sky, they huddled under the unfinished roof of the chapel, rain pounding around them. The wind whipped through the trees, bending branches like they were twigs. Clara could feel fear creeping in, but she clung to Grace, their shared determination the only anchor. As the storm raged, Clara glanced at Grace's face, illuminated by flashes of lightning. "When this storm passes, we'll be stronger," she promised, the words carrying the weight of their shared dreams. Hours later, the storm began to subside. The world outside felt transformed, drenched in the soothing scent of fresh rain. Clara emerged into the clearing, and her heart soared when she saw the chapel standing firm, resilient against the forces of nature. They returned to work the next day, embracing the refreshment brought by the rain. The sun returned, shining brightly again, turning the dust into mud that danced beneath their boots as they worked side by side. Slowly, the surrounding area started to feel vibrant. The fields gave hints of green, and a sense of hope filled the air. Then one evening, as they were painting the chapel's interior, Grace looked at Clara with glowing eyes. She asked, "All those nights we spent under the stars worrying about whether we could actually do this. Now look at what we've built together." Clara smiled, the warmth of Grace's words wrapping around her like a hug. "And we've built it from dust. From struggles, it's our story," she said, her heart swelling with pride. As the chapel neared completion, Clara decided it was time to invite the community for its first gathering. Flyers were posted around town, inviting families and neighbors to join them for a celebration of hope and resilience. The night of the gathering was magical. All around the chapel, the air buzzed with excitement. Clara watched as friends and strangers arrived, bringing food and stories. The lights twinkled above, illuminating their hopes and laughter. Standing before the gathering crowd, Clara felt a surge of emotions. She cleared her throat and began, "Thank you all for being here tonight. This chapel isn't just a building, it's a symbol of our shared strength. Together, we've transformed this space from dust into something beautiful." Cheers erupted, and Clara glanced at Grace, who was beaming with pride. For the first time in a long while, the weight of loneliness lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of community. As the night unfolded, families shared stories of their struggles, their joys, their journeys. Clara realized that the chapel had become a beacon, nurturing connections in a world that often felt divided. Through the laughter and the tears, Clara felt hope blooming anew. The storm clouds of loneliness and despair fell away, replaced by a tapestry of shared experiences woven together by the hands of many. Months rolled by, the chapel thriving with each gathering, a heart beating in the midst of the dust. As the seasons changed, so too did the lives around Clara. Children laughed in the fields, families came together in prayer, and Grace found a sense of belonging she had longed for. But there were days when Clara felt that familiar heaviness creeping back in. One evening, as she sat alone inside the chapel, the silence enveloped her like a blanket. She brushed her fingers over the wooden beams, the memories of struggle flooding her mind. Grace stepped in quietly, her presence breaking the stillness. "Hey," she said softly, sensing Clara's unease. "It's just, some days the weight of all this feels heavy," Clara admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought once we built the chapel, everything would change." Grace knelt beside Clara, her voice soothing. "They don't disappear, but the chapel gives us a place to share them. We have each other now." As they sat in silence, Clara felt a warmth wash over her. They had transformed this space from mere wood and nails into a home for hope, a safe haven to carry their burdens together. The years continued, and as Clara walked through the fields, she marveled at the hands that had come together to create something so beautiful. The chapel was no longer just a building. It was a sanctuary filled with the stories of resilience, a testament to the power of community. And through it all, Clara never forgot the moment she had found Grace praying in the dust. Their shared journey, built from struggles and hope, became a vibrant tapestry. Each thread told a story of loss, love, and the sheer determination to rise again. In the end, it wasn't just about bricks and mortar. It was about the lives touched by their labor, the hearts united in faith and friendship. Every prayer whispered in that chapel carried the weight of their collective dreams, echoing through the dust, reminding them that though the road ahead might be rugged, they would never walk it alone. As the sun set on that Texas horizon, Clara stood outside the chapel, the evening air filled with the sound of laughter and chatter. In that moment, she knew the essence of true strength lay in vulnerability, in the willingness to reach out and connect, to transform dust into a new beginning, and to build not just a chapel, but a family. In the heart of a parched Texas ranch, Clara McAllister stood knee-deep in dust, staring at the cracked earth that had once thrived under the sun. The sky loomed overhead, a relentless blue that felt more like a curse than a blessing. Days turned into weeks without a drop of rain, each moment a reminder of just how fragile life could be. Cattle were thin, their ribs showing starkly against their hides, and Clara's heart grew heavy as she felt a familiar loneliness creeping in. That afternoon, as she headed to check on her dwindling herd, something caught her eye. A figure knelt in the dirt near an old oak tree, her hands clasped tightly together, almost as if she were forging an invisible link between herself and the heavens. Clara squinted through the dust, recognizing a newcomer to the ranching community. Clara called out, her voice carrying over the hot wind. The young woman looked up, her eyes reflecting both surprise and raw emotion. "I'm Grace," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara felt a pang of compassion. Here was a woman searching for solace in a barren land, and Clara understood that longing all too well. "You're not alone out here," she said gently, stepping closer. Grace took a deep breath, glancing down. "I moved here to escape a life that felt like it was collapsing. I thought the space would help me find something hope maybe, but it just..." As those words hung in the air, Clara's heart tightened. "Life on a ranch can be brutal," she replied, her own struggles spilling out like a forgotten river. "But maybe we could build something together, a chapel perhaps." Grace's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. "You mean..." "Yes," Clara affirmed, excitement creeping into her voice. Standing together in that sun-baked grove, something shifted as if the very earth beneath them stirred to life. In that moment, they forged a pact, ready to fight the weight of their despair with the light of shared purpose. In the days that followed, they met each morning, fueled by coffee and the thrill of creation. Dust swirled around them as they rolled up their sleeves, clearing debris from the area beneath the oak tree. Together, they worked with determination that ignited Clara's spirit. Laughter filled the air, breaking the silence that had haunted her for so long. As they twirled, they shared stories. Grace spoke of a chaotic childhood in the city, the relationships that had faded away, while Clara revealed the trials faced on her ranch, the heartache that came with watching the land suffer. Each confessional moment bound their souls tighter, reminding Clara that she was not alone in her struggles. But soon, the weight of reality pressed back down like a heavy shroud. Day after day, the drought dragged on and the earth remained unforgiving. Clara watched as her cattle grew thin, their spirits dulled by lack of food and water. She fought against despair that threatened to seep into her mind. One evening, under a crescent moon, Clara felt a lump form in her throat. She confessed, her voice wavering. Grace turned to her, eyes glowing under the moonlight. Every dream starts small, Clara. It's the belief we build into it that makes it grow. Clara nodded slowly, comfort in Grace's resilience. You're right, Grace, we can't let fear win. Emboldened, they threw their energy into the project. They salvaged wood from old fences, nails that had rusted but still held firm. With every hammer strike, Clara felt a surge of strength. They were transforming not just the landscape, but their lives as well. But one fateful day, dark clouds rolled in, ominous and heavy. Clara stood in the doorway of the half-finished chapel, eyes trained on the tumultuous sky. This doesn't look good, she murmured. Rain fell, first like a whisper, then as a torrential rolling wave. Wind howled around them, branches swayed, and the beautiful chapel they had built began to tremble under the fury of the storm. Clara's heart raced. As they scrambled for shelter beneath the oak tree, the storm raged. Clara turned to Grace, her voice rising above the cacophony. Even storms must end. The thunder cracked as if to punctuate her words, but Clara could see the determination forming on Grace's face. You're right, hours later, the storm finally weakened, leaving behind a quiet stillness. Clara stepped out, soaked and shivering, but exhilarated. The moon peeked through the clouds, illuminating the swaths of water. She blinked as she saw their chapel weathering the storm, the beams standing firm and strong. Grace exclaimed, her joy infectious. In the days that followed, the storm brought occasional showers that softened the ground, washing away the dust that had laid above it for far too long. Clara felt a shift deep in her spirit, as if the rains were cleansing not just the earth, but her own soul. Soon, the chapel began to take shape. Grace painted the walls a warm shade of yellow, crushing wildflowers underfoot, mixing their essence into every stroke. With each detail, the space began to feel alive, imbued with the energy of their laughter and hard work. One day, while fastening the roof, Clara shared a thought. What if we open this place to the community? Grace's face lit with excitement. I love it. This chapel can be a beacon of hope for everyone around here. So they began planning for the grand opening, spreading the word through the community, inviting families and friends alike to join them for a celebration of renewed hope. When the day finally arrived, the sun seemed to shine brighter than it had in weeks. Clara stood at the entrance of the chapel, her heart pounding in her chest as neighbors filtered in. Laughter and chatter filled the air, creating a beautiful melody woven into the fabric of the moment. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of anticipation. Welcome, she called out, her voice strong. This chapel isn't just a building, it's a symbol of our strength and the community we've built. Applause erupted, and Clara looked over to see Grace, whose smile radiated pure joy. For the first time in a long time, Clara felt a sense of belonging bloom within her. Joy filled the chapel as stories flowed freely. A farmer spoke about struggling to keep his crops alive, a single mother shared her journey through grief, and a young girl recounted how she had found comfort here. Clara felt each story stitch the fabric of their community tighter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara and Grace stood side by side, their hearts swelling with pride. They had created something beautiful, a sanctuary of hope where others could gather to feel safe, to share their burdens. Weeks turned into months, and the chapel continued to thrive. The rains returned, revitalizing the earth and lifting Clara's heart. Cattle grew strong and robust once more, and life began to flourish again on her ranch. But even amidst the beauty, Clara faced moments of doubt. One evening, as she stared at the chapel, she felt a familiar weight settle in her chest. Would the struggles ever truly dissipate? Grace appeared behind her, sensing the tension. She asked gently. Clara turned, her voice shaky. Grace took a deep breath, exuding calm. They will linger. Life is an ebb and flow of highs and lows. Clara smiled through her tears, grateful for Grace's unwavering support. They had forged a bond through their struggles, and each moment shared only deepened that connection. As seasons changed and the chapel flourished, Clara watched the community grow around her, witnessing friendships blossoming in the very space they had created together. She marveled at the intertwining lives, knowing each one held a thread that contributed to the tapestry of hope they had woven. And one evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Clara stood outside the chapel, listening to the laughter of children at play. The warmth of joy spread through her chest, spilling over in quiet gratitude. In that moment, she recognized the power of vulnerability, the courage it took to reach out, to reveal pain while seeking connection. The chapel had become a refuge, a heart beating among them, nurturing every soul who entered. As the stars began to twinkle above, Clara encountered a profound sense of peace. This wasn't just a building, it was a living testament to the human spirit. Dust had transformed into something sacred, a home for hope that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, Clara and Grace had not only built a chapel, they had built a community. And in the unwavering spirit of connection, they had discovered that even in the dust, life could flourish. Each prayer whispered within those walls carried the weight of their resilience, reminding them all that no storm could extinguish their light. And as she looked up at the vast expanse of night, Clara felt an unshakable belief that they would continue to rise together, not just surviving, but thriving hand in hand, heart to heart, forever bound in their shared journey amid the dust. In the blistering heart of Texas, a dust storm brewed on the horizon, swirling like a wild beast ready to strike. Clara McAllister stood against it, her ranch stretching out behind her, barren and beaten by months of relentless heat. The land was cracked, and the sky above felt like a never-ending weight. With her hands resting on her hips, she gazed out at the empty fields, feeling as if hope was buried beneath the layers of grime. Suddenly, something caught her eye. A figure knelt in the dirt beside an old oak tree. Clara squinted through the settling dust and saw a young woman with tangled hair and a face streaked with tears, hands clasped tightly as if in desperate prayer. Clara's heart raced. What was a girl like her doing out here in the middle of nowhere? "Hey," Clara called out, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. The woman looked up, startled, and Clara could see the anguish etched on her face as she scrambled to her feet. I'm Grace," she stammered, brushing dirt from her clothes. "I didn't mean to intrude." Something about the weight in Grace's voice pulled Clara closer. She could see the emptiness in her eyes, a kindred spirit searching for solace in a harsh world. "You're not intruding. This is my land, and I've felt lost here too," Clara replied. Grace's lips trembled as she spoke. "I moved here hoping to escape the chaos of my life. I thought I'd find peace among the wide-open spaces, but instead I just feel." Clara felt a rush of sympathy surge within her. She could relate to the suffocating sense of despair. Lone ranching life often kept her isolated, wrestling with loneliness and worry all on her own. "Believe me," Clara said carefully, "we're all fighting our own battles, but maybe we could build something here together." Grace blinked, uncertainty flickering across her face. "You mean?" "Yes," Clara replied, her heart racing. "A place where people can come and pray, share their burdens, and find hope." For a moment, a glimmer of hope ignited in Grace's eyes, illuminating the darkness. "I'd love to do that," she breathed. In that sun-drenched grove where despair lingered, Clara felt the roots of purpose take hold within her. Together, they could transcend the limits of the barren land. In the days that followed, Clara and Grace met each morning, determination written on their faces. They cleared debris, pulled weeds, and shared laughter that pierced the heavy air. As they worked, each swing of the shovel seemed to chip away at the layers of loneliness that had cloaked them for too long. Together, they unearthed not just weeds, but the strength within themselves. While they toiled, Grace shared snippets of her past chaotic childhood moments, relationships that unraveled, all the while uncovering her scars. Clara spoke of the relentless demands of her ranch, the heartaches of loss, and the countless nights spent under a blanket of stars, searching for answers. Each story wove them closer, forming an unspoken bond that lifted their spirits in the dust. However, dark clouds loomed in more ways than one as the days turned into weeks. The drought continued to tighten its grip, and Clara watched helplessly as her land suffered. The cattle grew thin, their once vibrant eyes dimmed. A sadness settled deep within Clara's gut as she wrestled with the reality of it all. One stifling evening, she turned to Grace as they rested, seeking comfort. "What if we can't build the chapel?" Grace met her gaze, a flicker of determination sparking in her eyes. "Every dream feels impossible before it takes shape. What matters is that we believe in it. This chapel isn't just about us." Clara felt a warmth swell in her chest. She needed Grace's conviction. "You're right, we can't let fear win." Emboldened, they returned to their work with newfound energy. They salvaged wood from old fences, anxiously nailing beams together as if each strike would solidify their unyielding belief. The chapel began to rise, breathing life into the dry ghost town around them, each plank a testament to their soaring hopes. But just when it seemed that everything might be coming together, dark clouds rolled in yet again, but this time with dire promise. Clara stood outside as thunder echoed, sharp and loud. Raindrops began to tumble from the sky, quickly escalating into torrents that turned the earth into mud. "Clara," Grace shouted, her eyes wide with panic. The storm was fierce as they raced to shelter beneath the unfinished chapel. The wind howled, the rain whipped at their skin. For a moment, the world felt as if it were chaotic, on the brink of unraveling. Clara's heart drummed wildly against her chest. Grace cried over the clamor. Clara gritted her teeth, holding on tight to her resolve. "Because it is, but storms don't last forever. We have to believe even in the darkest moments." Grace looked at her, determination flickering like a candle flame. You're right, as the storm raged outside, they huddled close, emboldened by shared dreams. Hour after hour passed until finally the winds began to die down. Clara crept outside, her heart racing, taking in the chaos surrounding them. She blinked in disbelief when she saw their chapel standing tall, framed against the turbulent sky like a beacon of hope. Grace shouted, her voice filled with awe, "It's still standing." Days turned into weeks, and as the rain eased, the dust settled in a fresh, damp blanket over the earth. Clara felt the battle against nature become a little lighter, a little kinder. Finally, the thirsty ground soaked in new life, and Clara began to see the land revitalizing before her eyes. The grass turned green, the cattle regained their strength, and a rush of hope filled her heart. One evening, as they hung lanterns inside the chapel, Clara turned to Grace. "I think it's time we invite the community to celebrate with us." Grace beamed, her enthusiasm contagious. So they crafted an invitation that resonated with hope and resilience, spreading it far and wide among the few families left in the surrounding area, hoping to gather everyone for an evening of inspiration. When the day finally arrived, the sun shone upon them like a protective embrace. Clara stood at the entrance of the chapel, adorned with wildflowers, her heart racing as neighbors trickled in. Laughter and stories filled the air, weaving into the heart of the gathering. "Welcome," Clara announced, her voice rising above the chatter. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the chapel we built, but the strength we found in one another." Cheers erupted, and Clara's heart soared at the smiles around her. For the first time in what felt like ages, the emptiness began to fade, replaced by connection and community spirit. As the evening unfolded, people took turns sharing their stories. A farmer spoke of a devastating drought that had almost taken his family farm. A single mother recounted stories of struggle, but also of triumph. Clara noticed how the room felt heavier with shared burdens, but lighter at the same time, buoyed by their willingness to share them. She caught Grace's eye from across the room, and they exchanged a smile that spoke volumes. They had come together in this sacred space, transforming pain into strength and fear into hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara stood outside the chapel, watching the stars begin to twinkle in a darkening sky. She felt the warmth of community enveloping her. They were no longer individuals struggling alone, they were a family held together by shared experiences. Months turned into years, and the chapel flourished. It became a true sanctuary, buzzing with life, laughter, and soft whispers of prayer. Family gatherings took place under its roof, blessings were passed, and hope blossomed anew. But there were still days when Clara felt vulnerable, shadows creeping back into her mind. One evening, standing alone in the chapel, she wrapped her arms around herself as memories of loneliness and loss washed over her. Grace appeared at her side, sensing the heaviness. She asked gently. Clara sighed, her voice trembling. "I thought once we built this place, everything would be easy." Kneeling beside her, Grace squeezed Clara's hand. "You know, sometimes these shadows remind us of our humanity." Tears threatened to spill, and Clara wiped them away, grateful for her friend. As seasons changed and new life emerged, Clara and Grace watched their community grow. The chapel served as a foundation, not just for them, but for everyone seeking refuge from the storms of life. Standing outside the chapel one bright morning, Clara surveyed the verdant fields that had once been barren. The golden sun bathed everything in warmth, breathing life into her heart. She knew the real purpose of the chapel had never been just about its walls, it was about the connections they formed within it. And when Grace walked up beside her, grinning as sunlight danced through her hair, Clara realized that every hardship, every moment of uncertainty had led them to this place. The chapel wasn't merely a building, it was a transformation, a place where despair turned into hope and loneliness blossomed into love. As Clara breathed in the fresh air, she felt a sense of belonging wash over her. The dust that had once felt suffocating now held the stories of so many lives, intertwined through shared struggles, laughter, and love. In the heart of that Texas ranch, a chapel had risen from the dust, a testament to resilience, the enduring human spirit, and the bonds formed in moments of vulnerability. Together, they were building something far larger than just a sanctuary. They were nurturing a community, a family healing in the light. In the blistering heart of Texas, a dust storm brewed on the horizon, swirling like a wild beast ready to strike. Clara McAllister stood against it, her ranch stretching out behind her, barren and beaten by months of relentless heat. The land was cracked, and the sky above felt like a never-ending weight. With her hands resting on her hips, she gazed out at the empty fields, feeling as if hope was buried beneath the layers of grime. Suddenly, something caught her eye. A figure knelt in the dirt beside an old oak tree. Clara squinted through the settling dust and saw a young woman with tangled hair and a face streaked with tears, hands clasped tightly as if in desperate prayer. Clara's heart raced. What was a girl like her doing out here in the middle of nowhere? Clara called out, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. The woman looked up, startled, and Clara could see the anguish etched on her face as she scrambled to her feet. I'm Grace," she stammered, brushing dirt from her clothes. "I didn't mean to intrude." Something about the weight in Grace's voice pulled Clara closer. She could see the emptiness in her eyes, a kindred spirit searching for solace in a harsh world. "You're not intruding, this is my land, and I've felt lost here too," Clara replied. Grace took a deep breath, glancing down. "I moved here to escape a life that felt like it was collapsing. I thought the space would help me find something hope maybe." Clara felt a rush of sympathy surge within her. Here was a woman searching for peace just as she had been struggling to find resilience. "Believe me," Clara said carefully, "we're all fighting our own battles, but maybe we could build something here together." Grace's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope igniting within them. "You mean?" "Yes," Clara replied, the idea igniting a fire within her. "A place where people can come and pray, share their burdens, and find hope." For a moment, a glimmer of hope ignited in Grace's eyes, illuminating the darkness. "I'd love to do that," she breathed. In that sun-drenched grove where despair lingered, Clara felt the roots of purpose take hold within her. Together, they could transcend the limits of the barren land. In the days that followed, Clara and Grace met each morning, determination written on their faces. They cleared debris, pulled weeds, and shared laughter that pierced the heavy air. As they worked, each swing of the shovel seemed to chip away at the layers of loneliness that had cloaked them for too long. Together, they unearthed not just weeds, but the strength within themselves. While they toiled, Grace shared snippets of her past chaotic childhood moments, relationships that unraveled, all the while uncovering her scars. Clara spoke of the relentless demands of her ranch, the heartaches of loss, and the countless nights spent under a blanket of stars, searching for answers. Each story wove them closer, forming an unspoken bond that lifted their spirits in the dust. However, dark clouds loomed in more ways than one as the days turned into weeks. The drought continued to tighten its grip, and Clara watched helplessly as her land suffered. The cattle grew thin, their once vibrant eyes dimmed. A sadness settled deep within Clara's gut as she wrestled with the reality of it all. One stifling evening, she turned to Grace as they rested, seeking comfort. "What if we can't build the chapel?" Grace turned to her, a flicker of determination sparking in her eyes. "Every dream feels impossible before it takes shape. What matters is that we believe in it. This chapel isn't just about us." Clara felt a warmth swell in her chest. She needed Grace's conviction. "You're right, we can't let fear win." Emboldened, they returned to their work with newfound energy. They salvaged wood from old fences, anxiously nailing beams together as if each strike would solidify their unyielding belief. The chapel began to rise, breathing life into the dry ghost town around them, each plank a testament to their soaring hopes. But just when it seemed that everything might be coming together, dark clouds rolled in yet again, but this time with dire promise. Clara stood outside as thunder echoed, sharp and loud. Raindrops began to tumble from the sky, quickly escalating into torrents that turned the earth into mud. "Clara," Grace shouted, her eyes wide with panic. The storm was fierce as they raced to shelter beneath the oak tree. The wind howled, the rain whipped at their skin. For a moment, the world felt as if it were chaotic, on the brink of unraveling. Clara's heart drummed wildly against her chest. Grace cried over the clamor. Clara gritted her teeth, holding on tight to her resolve. "Because it is, but storms don't last forever. We have to believe even in the darkest moments." Grace looked at her, determination flickering like a candle flame. "You're right." As the storm raged outside, they huddled close, emboldened by shared dreams. Hour after hour passed, until finally the winds began to die down. Clara crept outside, her heart racing, taking in the chaos surrounding them. She blinked in disbelief when she saw their chapel standing tall, framed against the turbulent sky like a beacon of hope. Grace shouted, her voice filled with awe. "It's still standing." Days turned into weeks, and as the rain eased, the dust settled in a fresh, damp blanket over the earth. Clara felt the battle against nature become a little lighter, a little kinder. Finally, the thirsty ground soaked in new life, and Clara began to see the land revitalizing before her eyes. The grass turned green, the cattle regained their strength, and a rush of hope filled her heart. One evening, as they hung lanterns inside the chapel, Clara turned to Grace. "I think it's time we invite the community to celebrate with us." Grace beamed, her enthusiasm contagious. So they crafted an invitation that resonated with hope and resilience, spreading it far and wide among the few families left in the surrounding area, hoping to gather everyone for an evening of inspiration. When the day finally arrived, the sun shone upon them like a protective embrace. Clara stood at the entrance of the chapel, adorned with wildflowers, her heart racing as neighbors trickled in. Laughter and stories filled the air, weaving into the heart of the gathering. "Welcome," Clara announced, her voice rising above the chatter. "Tonight we celebrate not just the chapel we built, but the strength we found in one another." Cheers erupted, and Clara glanced at Grace, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time in what felt like ages, the emptiness began to fade, replaced by connection and community spirit. As the evening unfolded, people took turns sharing their stories. A farmer spoke of a devastating drought that had almost taken his family farm. A single mother recounted stories of struggle, but also of triumph, and an elderly couple shared laughter about the ups and downs of life. Clara noticed how the room felt heavier with shared burdens, but lighter at the same time, buoyed by their willingness to share them. She caught Grace's eye from across the room, and they exchanged a smile that spoke volumes. They had come together in this sacred space, transforming pain into strength and fear into hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara stood outside the chapel, watching the stars begin to twinkle in a darkening sky. She felt the warmth of community enveloping her. They were no longer individuals struggling alone. They were a family, held together by shared experiences. Months rolled by, the chapel thriving with each gathering, a heart beating in the midst of the dust. As the seasons changed, so too did the lives around Clara. Children laughed in the fields, families gathered for dinners, and friends leaned on each other through hard times. The spirit of the chapel grew, becoming not just a place but a living testament to the strength found in vulnerability. But one evening, as Clara prepared for another meeting, she felt the familiar pang of loneliness return. As the sun set, she sat alone in the chapel, the silence enveloping her like a blanket. She brushed her fingers over the wooden beams, the memories of struggle flooding her mind. Then Grace burst in, carrying wildflowers and a grin that could rival the sun. She shouted joyfully, scattering petals around Clara. "Those are beautiful, Grace," Clara said, her heart swelling at the sight. Grace stepped closer, her expression suddenly serious. "You've shown me that even in the dust, we can build magic." Clara touched Grace's arm gently, "And they will continue to carry us through the storms and the quiet nights." From that day on, the chapel became a hub of joy, love, and healing. Clara and Grace worked to facilitate gatherings, encouraging stories to be shared and burdens to be lifted. As time passed and the seasons changed, they found joy in the little moments, children playing outside, families gathering for dinners, and friends leaning on each other through hard times. The spirit of the chapel grew, becoming not just a place but a living testament to the strength found in vulnerability. Standing in the chapel one evening, while the last light faded into night, Clara knew without a doubt that the journey they had embarked on had changed them all forever. The dust that had once felt like a weight now felt like a foundation, one built on hope, love, and a reminder that they could face anything together. And as the stars twinkled high above, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The chapel stood strong in the night, a symbol of resilience against the vast Texas landscape. In that moment, she knew the journey was far from over. Challenges would come and go, just like the seasons. But with the community by her side, and with Grace's unwavering spirit, they could face anything. As darkness descended and the stars began to twinkle against the night sky, Clara felt an unshakable belief that they would continue to rise together, not just surviving but thriving hand in hand, heart to heart, forever bound in their shared journey amid the dust. The sun hung low, bleeding crimson across the Texas sky, casting long shadows over the dry, cracked earth. Clara McAllister stood at the edge of her sprawling ranch, feeling the weight of the heat pressing down on her. A relentless drought had taken hold, sapping the life from the land she had devoted herself to for years. With every inch of the parched ground, Clara felt the sting of despair, a creeping sense that all her hard work was slipping through her fingers like sand. That afternoon, she made her way toward a familiar spot, an old oak tree that had survived many storms. Its deep roots had anchored it solidly despite the odds. As Clara reached the shade, something unexpected caught her eye, something that sent a shiver down her spine. A young woman knelt in the dirt, nonchalant to the world around her, hands clasped tightly as if grasping for a thread of hope. "Hey," Clara called, her voice breaking through the heavy silence. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with unshed tears, and she quickly brushed a hand across her cheeks. "I'm Grace," she managed, rising unsteadily to her feet. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." Clara felt a pang of empathy. "You're not intruding at all." Grace hesitated, her voice trembling. "I moved here to escape my past, thinking the fresh air would help me find peace, but all I feel is lost." A flood of understanding washed over Clara. She had wrestled with the same ghosts, haunted by moments that clung to her like fog. "This land can feel heavy," Clara replied, her own voice steadying. "But you don't have to carry it alone. What if we built something together?" Grace's eyes lit up, small embers of hope sparked within. "A chapel, yes," Clara affirmed, feeling a fire ignite in her heart. "A sanctuary for those who feel lost like us." In that moment, the dust that had weighed them down seemed to shift. Clara felt a rush of purpose, as if the very air around them breathed life back into their weary spirits. They began to talk, the shared dream unfolding like pages of an unwritten story. The days that followed transformed into a blur of determination. Clara and Grace met at dawn, armed with shovels and a shared vision. They cleared the earth beneath the oak tree, peeling back layers of dust, reveling in the laughter that punctuated their toil. Clara felt the burden of loneliness begin to lift. Grace's presence filled an emptiness she had long thought unfillable. Grace asked one morning, wiping sweat from her brow. "Absolutely," Clara assured her, glancing over the land they were transforming. "This place will be a beacon." But as they worked, storms loomed in both the skies and their hearts. The drought continued to linger, a shadow that loomed over their efforts. Clara saw the signs everywhere. The cattle were thin, the pastures brown and lifeless. The weight of worry pressed down, reminding her of her own struggles. One evening, as they sat on the steps of the unfinished chapel, Clara's heart felt heavy with doubt. She whispered, staring at the fading sunlight, Grace looked at her with fierce eyes, determination sparking. "No dream dies without a fight. You taught me that. We will finish this chapel, Clara. It's more than just wood and nails." But as Clara held onto that hope, nature had other plans. One evening while they were mid-construction, dark clouds rolled in, thick and ominous. The sky rumbled and the wind picked up, whipping through the trees like a banshee. Clara reached for Grace's hand as the first drops of rain fell, turning quickly into a torrential downpour. Clara shouted, pulling Grace along as the storm burst open around them. They huddled beneath the shelter of the oak, the rain pounding on the leaves, the wind howling like a wounded animal. Grace cried, fear lacing her voice. Clara countered, her determination rising above the chaos. As the winds roared, Clara felt the surge of adrenaline, but also fear. What if they lost everything? Every effort, every dream seemed like it might wash away. Each flash of lightning illuminated the darkening sky, revealing a landscape transformed by the fury of nature. She held onto Grace's hand tighter, both women feeling the world around them tremble. "Even storms end," Clara reassured, though her voice felt small against the rising tempest. Hours passed before the winds finally began to calm and the rain turned into a gentle patter. Clara and Grace cautiously stepped out from under the oak tree, eyes wide at the sight before them. Their chapel stood resilient, the walls intact, seeming even more steadfast against the chaotic backdrop of the storm. "It's still here," Grace breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. In that moment, something shifted. Clara's faith had grown stronger, bolstered by the shared struggles they faced. "We've been through this storm, Grace." With renewed energy, they resumed their work, pouring even more care and diligence into building their chapel. Day by day, they scavenged for materials, their determination growing even through the uncertainty. It wasn't long before townsfolk began to hear whispers of their endeavor. Curiosity sparked interest, and soon the vision of the chapel evolved, transforming from just an idea between friends to a community project. Months rolled on, and every moment spent building brought people together in unexpected ways. Neighbors, once distant, began to gather, sharing stories over cups of coffee and home-cooked meals. Clara felt the power of community encircle them, their burdens lightening in the presence of shared joy and connection. And then one day they decided it was time to hold the grand opening. Clara and Grace felt a wave of exhilaration as they prepared for the ceremony. They decorated the chapel's interior with wildflowers, the scent freshening the air, the colors vibrant against the wooden walls. When the day came, the sun shone brilliantly. Clara stood at the entrance of the chapel, her heart racing as neighbors trickled in, smiles spreading across their faces. Laughter filled the air, mingling with the scent of food brought by the community. It felt like a celebration, one filled with life. Clara announced, her voice ringing out over the crowd, "We're not just opening a chapel, we're joining together as a family." Applause erupted, and Clara looked down at Grace, who beamed with joy. They had endured so much together, and now, in this moment, felt like everything they had dreamed of was finally coming to fruition. As the day went on, people shared their stories, each heart laid bare, each voice contributing to the tapestry of their shared experience. A farmer spoke of hardship and resilience, a mother shared her battle against grief, and a child recounted the adventures of the ranch. The room felt alive, a buzzing web of connection that wrapped around Clara's heart. But amidst the joy, Clara stole a moment to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The sun hung low, casting a golden hue over the land, illuminating the chapel in a truly magnificent way. She felt a flicker of anxiety rise, brought back to the quiet moments of isolation she often faced. Just then, Grace joined her, noticing the change in Clara's demeanor. She asked, genuine concern mingling with love. Clara hesitated before speaking. "What if this is just a moment? What if the loneliness comes back?" Grace placed her hands on Clara's shoulders, grounding her. "We built this together, Clara. You're not alone anymore. You have me, and you have this community." As the words settled, Clara felt a warmth drench her fears, an understanding that the love surrounding her was indeed powerful. Just then, a shadow fell over them, shifting Clara's attention. A man stood at the edge of the gathering, his frame framed by the sunset's glow. Clara felt a familiar unease rise within. It was a figure she'd seen before, a reminder of past struggles. As he approached, she sensed the air around them shift, a tension that was visceral. "Looks like you've made your little paradise here," he sneered, arms crossed over his chest. His dark demeanor felt like a storm cloud rolling back in. Clara's heart raced. "We've worked hard on this chapel. Hope," he laughed, a harsh sound that sliced through the warmth of the moment. Clara felt the weight of his words press in, a challenge that stirred a mix of emotion within her, a boiling rage entwined with doubt. This was what she had feared, the return of insecurities intruding upon the sanctuary they had built. "Because we're stronger together," Grace interjected, stepping forward defiantly. "You may think it's just dust and dreams, but we've created a home, a community." The tension hung thick in the air, the heat of lingering sunlight now feeling like a weighty shroud. Clara's heart pounded. She wanted to respond, to drive the man away from this moment, but her voice felt stuck in her throat. In that chaotic moment, she realized that the storms they had faced and the community they had built were challenged by someone who saw only darkness. The man's looming shadow threatened to unravel everything they had woven together. As the atmosphere crackled with uncertainty, Clara faced him boldly, gripping her resolve. "You may doubt us, but we will prove you wrong." But as their eyes locked, Clara could see the determination in his gaze grow darker, as if the promise of discord had taken root. And just like that, she knew this confrontation was just the beginning of a larger struggle. The laughter from inside the chapel began to fade, replaced by a heavy silence hanging in the air. Clara felt the weight of fear and doubt blend, leaving her unsteady in her own skin. They had come so far, built so much, but as the sun dipped lower and shadows deepened, Clara wondered what awaited them on the horizon. Would this challenge break them or strengthen their resolve? The winds were changing, and with it came uncertainty that felt like a dust storm headed straight for them. As the community stood behind her, Clara held her breath, knowing that what lay ahead would test not just their chapel, but the very fabric of their bonds. Would they weather the storm, or would the dust consume them all? The ground quaked beneath her as she prepared for the battle ahead, heart racing with both fear and determination, unwilling to back down.